want to move now to your legal career and your law studies. How did you and why did you apply to the law school where you went in Kenya? Because you went to school in Kenya, right?
Yes, I did. Initially, I only went out for my master's, but otherwise my bachelor's and even the law school was in Kenya. I applied to go to law school because, as I have told you earlier, that was the only thing I knew I was going to become, and that is what I was studying for. And I remember when we were filling the forms of what we were going to do in the university, one of the teachers said, law is a very difficult profession. You have to do very difficult exams. And that would have discouraged me maybe to take something else. But for me, I remember what my dad said, if you work hard enough, nothing is difficult. So I said, well, of course it has to be difficult because it's good. So I applied for that. And then I also remember one of my very close friends telling me, why are you applying for law? There are no more courts that are being built. There are no more prisons that are being built. Where will you get a job? And I said, well, people are still doing law. I will go wherever they are going. And I applied and I ended up getting it.
And you did very well in law school. You graduated and you became an advocate. In those first 3 or so years, what were you doing as an advocate?
First of all, immediately after law school, I was highly recommended by the principal of the law school to become a magistrate, because really that is what I wanted to do. And I was highly recommended. But when I went for the interview before the judicial service panel, unfortunately, I was not taken. So I was very disappointed. It was an all-male panel. And even from the kind of questions that I was being asked, I could see that they were not really for a woman. At that time, there were only 2 women who were in the judiciary. And that year, my year, no lady was taken. They only took men. So I think that's why I missed out. And then after that, I got a job as a land registrar for some time. In fact, it's the principal who now got me that job. But then I was not happy there. So that is why now I ended up to work as an advocate. As an advocate, I was basically going to court, litigation, criminal matters, civil matters, and even doing drafting documents like land transactions and all that. So that's what I was doing initially, but then later I ended up somehow being pushed into doing more of criminal work, because my boss really more of civil work, not criminal, civil work, because my boss liked to do criminal work. He didn't like civil work. So I ended up doing most of the civil work. And that's how I came now to like even the civil work. Initially, I liked criminal, but when I started doing the civil, now I like the civil, but I could also still do the criminal. And that really helped me. When I now came into the judiciary, I could fit in anywhere.
And so I think there are 2 important lessons, Justice, from just what you've shared with us. Number 1, the dean saw your talent and saw that you should be a magistrate. And yes, so your lesson of working hard really paid off. And number 2, you were rejected the first time as a magistrate, but you never gave up that dream. You never gave up, right?
No. So, I did not give up.
And that again comes back to your daddy.
Yes.
Yes, yes. And so then the second time you applied, you got the position as magistrate. So they obviously recognized your skills and your talents. You had both criminal and civil experience. So how was the interview that second time?
The second time, I think they were more open-minded. And I think the reason was because, for example, my colleagues who joined as magistrate, my male colleagues, whom we left the law school together and who became magistrate immediately, about 3/4 left within the 3 years. And that was because basically most of them were just going to the judiciary to gather experience, and then they go out on their own into private practice to start their businesses. So at that time, the judiciary was paying very, very little. So most of the men didn't stay. Mm-hmm. And that is why now they were beginning to realize that the ladies were much more serious, and many of them, when they took the job, they stuck to the job. And actually, like for example, myself, I joined the judiciary in 1983, and I have been in the judiciary since then, apart from about 2.5 years when I was appointed to the Kenya Anticorruption Authority for that just short time.
So things had changed, and there was a recognition of the talent of women and the recognition of the dedication of women. And so you served as a magistrate, and then ultimately you became the chief magistrate. Why did you take that position, and how did you contribute being the chief magistrate?
Of course, when you join any position, you aspire to get to the top level of that particular position. And the chief magistrate was the top level of the magistracy. So when I joined, when I was appointed as chief magistrate, I had gone through the various ranks. You see, you become a principal magistrate, senior principal magistrate, before you get to the position of chief magistrate. So basically, I was getting my promotions every 2-3 years. I would get a promotion, and chief magistrate was actually a promotion. And when I joined the judiciary, about 6 months later, I was given responsibility, a court to man. So I was in charge of that court. And throughout my career in the judiciary, I have always been in charge of a court, in charge somewhere. Like now, I'm in charge of the civil division of the Court of Appeal. I have been in charge in the as presiding judge in the Court of Appeal at Malindi. I have been in charge as a judge in charge in Mombasa Court and in Nakuru Court. So basically, I was always being given responsibilities as in charge. And I think I also try to be as innovative as I can. And that was one of the ways that I dealt with the backlog and matters in my station. And that helped me to stand out as an officer who was very good in his or her work.
Because so, you've served on a couple committees that reflect that in the judiciary. On the Implementing the Administration of Justice Committee, the Information Technology Committee, the Transportation Committee, the Judicial Leaders Advisory Committee. So for you, leadership, I think going back again to your daddy, he saw that you had those skills, the skills of leadership and innovation. So here's my question. Others have to come along with you when you lead. So what is your secret sauce, or what is the secret to getting others to move along with you and to bring them along?
One of the things that I have used in my leadership is always to work with my group as a team. Whenever I start, I think, I don't know whether it's the way I talk or the way my demeanor, they always think I'm very harsh. But when they know me, they get to know me, we work for a while, they get to know me, I find that they become very supportive, and they buy into whatever we are doing, and we move along as a team. So I provide leadership, but I'm also a member of that team, and we work together as a team.
And you have, you have a reputation for being someone who gets things done, but a reputation for being patient and bringing people along and giving them responsibilities so that they're sharing as a team. Is that right,
Exactly.
Justice?
Yes, precisely.
So one of the things that you did was you started that bench bar committee. You were the first magistrate to do that. And I remember coming to Kenya and hearing about that project. Why was it so important for you to put the bench bar committee together? And it wasn't just the lawyers. You reached out to a broader community, didn't you? Could you share with us who participated in that?
Okay. Thank you, Judge. Initially, I started a bar bench committee when I was working in the civil court. And it was because we had so many issues about files missing, about advocates complaining they were not getting dates, their matters were not being heard. And so because of that, a few advocates actually came and approached me, and they were trying to talk about these problems. And then we discussed with the advocates. And then we said, why don't we form a committee so that we can discuss these matters and we see how best to deal with them. So that's how it started. We got a few advocates. They started giving us ideas. We were sharing with them our problems. They were sharing with us the problems from their perspective. And that way, we were able now to start thinking about how to deal with those issues. So from that informal kind of committee, the idea, I think, worked well, that the Law Society now got one of their committee members to be in that committee. So initially, it was a committee in the magistrates' court. Then when we opened up our first court, our first high court in commercial division, I was the deputy registrar in that court. So again, from there, we had again a similar committee to deal with those issues. But at that time, it was just advocates and magistrates who were involved. But when I went to work in Nakuru, there was a big problem there of cases that had been pending for a long, long time. Nothing was moving. So now I expanded that committee. I called the investigators, the prosecutors, the probation officers, the advocates, and now we had a much more broader committee. And we discussed those problems, and we discussed and we agreed on strategies, how to deal with the matters. And within a short time, the problems were solved, matters started moving. And of course, everybody was talking about it. And advocates also were talking about it. And that is how now that idea caught up. We now started having also other magistrates and other judges coming up with similar initiatives. And then now, when we had our new constitution, the idea was now brought on board at a much higher level, so that you have a high-level committee made up of the Attorney General, the Chief Justice, and all those people who are in high level in the administration of justice. And then it is cascaded down to the courts, where it is the magistrate in charge or the judge in charge and the other stakeholders who are within the court system. And that way, it's working very well, because people are able to know what the problems are, what is the impact of whatever is going on in the court, and they are able to take remedial action when necessary.
And that national committee, could you give us the name of that committee? Actually, I'm supposed to come back to Kenya in April, and I will be attending that meeting. There are, I understand the head of the prisons is part of that group. Some
Yes.
legal aid societies are part of that group. And I remember so well before the Constitution, your initiative, because I remember us talking about it when we were having our exchanges and how it caught like wildfire across Kenya. So but I didn't realize, Justice, that you were the one that started the first one. So it's made a tremendous difference to the people that you serve. and to
Yes.
all the stakeholders. So your innovative approach is really, really quite extraordinary. So you're on the, eventually you make it
You've
to
asked me about the name of the National Committee.
Right.
It is called the National Committee on the Administration of Justice.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
And that's the committee that then takes complaints from different constituents, and then the stakeholders meet together to try to come up collectively and together with a plan.
The high level committee deals with policy issues and all that. Then at the lower level, we now have the same committee at the implementation level.
In the Court of Appeals, you said you're in charge of, did you say civil matters in the
Civil
Court
division.
of Appeals? So
Civil
it's,
division.
share with us what that means.
In the Court of Appeal, we have basically, okay, the Court of Appeal in Kenya, you handle everything that comes from the High Court, that comes from the Courts of Equal Status, that is the Employment and Labor Relations Court, and the Environment and Land Court, and even the tribunals. So it means really we are a jack of all trade. We handle everything, literally everything. And we have put these matters into two segments. We have the criminal division that basically deals with criminal appeals and matters emanating from the criminal court. And then we have the civil division that deals with all these other matters. Now, we have got two outside courts. One is in Mombasa, where we have 3 judges that are stationed there. They handle all the matters from that direction, you know, from that region. They deal with all the matters. Then we also have another 3 judges who are stationed in the western part of Kenya, in Kisumu. They also handle all the matters from that region. But the bulk of the matters are in Nairobi, and that is where I am. And so now I'm the one who is in charge of the civil division, and this entails dealing with the matters, especially when it comes to looking at strategies, how you can, how to make the matters move faster, because one of the biggest problems that we have is backlog. So how to address the issue of backlog, how to address the issue of urgent applications when they come, how to liaise with advocates so that you are able to deal with whatever issues that they have. But we also do have a bar bench committee for the Court of Appeal, where I have another colleague who is now in charge of that.
So how do you feel things are moving along, knowing what these issues are? And can you share with us a couple things you've done to help make the cases move faster at the appellate level in the civil division?
Well, since I took over, COVID has played havoc. Because, because things now didn't move the way they were moving. But one of the things really, which it's the whole court. I can't say it's me, it's just the whole court that has come together and we have agreed on it. We have been able to handle all our matters using online platforms. So we do all our matters virtually, and that has really, really helped the matters to be able to move. Whether it is criminal or civil, we just hear them virtually, and the advocates are given time so that they file their written submissions, and when they come to the court, we time them. We tell them maybe you have 15 minutes or 20 minutes or 10 minutes, and then you just highlight, because we already have the written submissions, so you don't need to take so long. And that has really helped matters to move. We are very short-handed right now. The judges are very few, but with the online platform, we have been able to make a lot of improvements.
It is so good to hear, Justice, about time limits. I can remember when I first started working in Kenya with the judiciary, people were very nervous. They were reluctant to do time limits. And I know that when Kenyan delegations have come to the US, I have always asked the most senior person to sit on the bench with me not to decide the case, but to see the case, to see that you really can get to the heart of the case in 10, 15, 20 minutes, because the advocates are answering your questions. You have done all the reading. It is so heartening to hear that that's the way you're conducting things now. And so one question I have is, COVID is finally, we think, going down, but will you in the Court of Appeals keep that option, or will there be an option for advocates to handle things remotely? Because Kenya is a large country. There's a lot of traveling that goes on, a lot of expense. Do you think you will build that into your system, not requiring everybody to do it virtually, but is the court thinking about that?
Well, we have not discussed it, but personally, I think it is something which is very good. It has worked very well. We will need to discuss it with our stakeholders, but even the stakeholders, initially they were very resistant, but now they are used to it. And many of them, as you say, it's working well. They don't have to travel as much as they used to travel. And it's much cheaper even for the litigants. And so we will need to keep, it would be good if we could keep it and only use the physical court sessions for matters that are really necessary, like, for example, where you have many parties, or maybe just for criminal matters and things like that.
Yeah, we're grappling in the US with the same thing, because it's been very helpful to us as well. So we had an opportunity to talk about what you've done in the judiciary, but you also did anti-corruption work early in your career. Could you share that with us?
Actually, it was in the middle of my career as a magistrate. When I was chief magistrate, I was appointed as assistant director in the Kenya Anticorruption Authority that had just been set up. I went into that authority to do prosecution work. I went there as in charge of prosecution. So I set up the prosecution department, and we started prosecuting cases of corruption. It was quite an interesting job dealing with corruption, but also a very difficult job because you have a lot of resistance and problems from all sides. Particularly when we started serious prosecutions. One of the people we prosecuted was a minister. We also prosecuted a town clerk, and we prosecuted some engineer. So when we started this serious prosecution, I think it sent shockwaves. And so we started having problems. And finally, a case was taken to court where it was said that a matter was brought in the High Court that because the director then was a judge of the High Court. No, he was a judge of the High Court. And they said that you cannot have an institution which has a judge. Although he had been seconded to that department, he was still holding his position as a judge. And then you also have a prosecutor. And then we also had an investigator. We also had a police officer who was in charge of investigation. So they said that you cannot have that kind of organization, that it was an unconstitutional body. So that CASA was, they had to be disbanded because of that. What was interesting about this job, first of all, it was a presidential appointment. Secondly, there was a lot of intrigues in my taking up the position, because the Chief Justice did not want me to take the position. The then Chief Justice, and that he wanted to have me made as a judge. So he didn't want me to take the job. But I found that very difficult because at that time, the appointing authority for judgeship was the president. And here I was, having been appointed and having been gazetted for a position which I was being appointed by the president. So I found it difficult, and I was telling him, I cannot refuse to take this job. If you want to have me appointed as a judge instead, it should be for you to go and take it up with the president and sort it out.
Quite a remarkable journey that you had that time away from the judiciary and to prosecute those kinds of cases that are so important. Another thing that happened while you were on the bench is, you joined pretty quickly the International Association of Women Judges.
My participation in the International Association of Women Judges as the president of the local chapter here, and also as the president of the African region, trying to bring all the women judges from the region together. I'm still trying to do that because I'm still in the board. I'm the board director. It's difficult, but we are still trying to do it.
Yeah, and it's such a wonderful organization. And I'm so glad you brought it up, Justice. That organization is so effective globally. And when we talk about giving back and your understanding of what it's like to stand in the shoes of the magistrates and to help create the path going forward, that work is so important.
As a result, I've also tried to mentor some young girls. I've been on school boards, and I talk to them and I try to mentor them. I encourage them, those who are interested in law, I tell them what it's all about. And I'm happy that even on the family side, I have 3 nieces who have done law, and 2 nephews who have also done law. So I think that is an indication of the kind of influence that one can have on the younger people.